So welcome everybody. It's 2 o'clock now, so we'll get underway. And the intro will take a minute or two. So for anybody lagging behind by a moment, they won't miss anything. I'm Laura DePalmer from Renew International, and thank you all so much for joining us for our Laudato Si webinar. It is the last one in our series about creation, and it wraps up our celebration of the 8th anniversary of Pope Francis's landmark encyclical. As we move through the discussion today, I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it again for people who've signed on. Please feel free to put any questions or comments into the Q&A box. I'll be happy to pose any of those thoughts to our panelists today. So we definitely want to hear everything you have to say. If you look in the bottom bar at the bottom of your screen, or some of you might even have it on the side or the top, right next to the mute and video buttons. If you look right in line there, there's a Q&A box, and you can just click that and type any questions or comments that you have right there. And if you have any technical difficulties, I'm certainly not an IT expert, but I'm happy to try and help you as best you can. So please feel free to reach out with any of those issues. We're thrilled today to be joined by our two esteemed panelists, Sister Honora and Dan Misleh. Dan Misleh is the founder of Catholic Climate Covenant, which he started in 2006 in response to the U.S. Bishop's Statement on Climate Change. The organization seeks to engage the Catholic community in a serious and sustained conversation about a Catholic approach to climate change from a faith lens. Dan has spoken to dozens of local, regional, and national Catholic and secular groups and has engaged the media on broadcasts, podcasts, newspapers, articles, and interviews. So if there's a form of media, Dan has definitely covered it. To include some time with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops as a policy advisor, and also as the Director of Diocesan Relations for the Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development. And I believe he's also worked with Sister Honora before on our own Creation at the Crossroads, that resource. So two of you have a shared history together as well. Great. And Sister Honora is our other guest. She led our Earth Day webinar just a few weeks ago. She has been a Dominican sister for 65 years, and currently she is retired from her exciting life as an educator, administrator, and pastoral minister, mostly in the great diocese of Brooklyn, which is also my hometown, but also nationally and internationally. Honora attributes her passion for works of justice to her mom's example. Her mom, Katie, with her small group of women, weekly prayed the rosary through the United Nations General Assembly meetings on Mondays. Sister Honora, would you lead us in an opening prayer before we get started?
Gladly. Will you be putting it up, Laura?
Absolutely.
And I thought the way we would pray is everyone is muted except Dan and I. Right. So I will begin with the prayer, and I'll begin the first paragraph. And then Dan, if you would do the second, then I'll do the third, and I'll close it, okay? So if you would just put that up, Laura, I'd be grateful.
There you go. Can you see that all right?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. So let's just take a moment and take a deep breath and get here. This is Laudato Si week, so it's wonderful to have this opportunity today. And it's also the season of Pentecost, so we welcome all of the gifts of the Spirit. And so we pray, oh God, let our longing for a healthy environment be grounded in the confident awareness of your Spirit in our lives.
May that Spirit bless us with courage and hope as we continue our humble efforts to promote the care of the earth, our common home, and to communicate our concern to others.
We thank you for gathering us together this day. Bless the many who do not yet share the blessings of the common good. Bless our families, friends, and loved ones. And I invite you to bring to mind someone or some place that you wish peace to this day. And we ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you so much, sister. That was beautiful. So I'll start at the very beginning. Let me take this prayer down. And I'm wondering if you would both share with us, what was the impetus that originally made each of you committed to environmental work?
Sister Honora, do you want to go first?
Well, very honestly, I've always been involved with justice work, and I get that from my family growing up. But I have to honestly admit that in terms of environmental justice, I'm a newbie. I am a Pope Francis groupie, and when he came out with Laudato Si, it just grabbed me. It was so, I had taken a course with Tom Berry years ago, and I didn't know what he was talking about. But I was aware a little bit. However, Laudato Si was written so plainly. It was so accessible. It connected my faith and the environment. It just made sense. And the urgency of it captured me. And so that was my introduction, very honestly, to environmental justice specifically. And I have to say that everything that comes out on it, both from Catholic Climate Covenant and from the Vatican, I'm passionate about it at this stage of the game, and can't do enough. And it's yeah, when I have downtime, it's what I think about.
For me, I'll come to it in a minute. There was one moment that really sort of galvanized this for me. But I was in Boy Scouts. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and was in a Boy Scout troop that made Eagle and all of that good stuff. And when you're in Scouts, you do a lot of outdoor activities. And back in that day, literally decades ago, I'm afraid to say, I also joined the Explorer Scouts, which that takes you from about 18 years old till about 21, 22. So it's, girls were allowed to, which made it even more exciting. But so during that whole time, I was outdoors a lot, camping. We rafted. We raised money to raft the rivers in West Virginia. We raised enough money to take a trip to Colorado and rafted the Grand Canyon, the Colorado River. We were up in Canada on a 2-week-long canoe trip. So a lot of outdoor activity, and I always admired the outdoors. And went to Alaska as a Jesuit volunteer, so I experienced a whole new part of God's good gift of creation. Met a woman there from California. We got married, lived in California, so I've found the beauty of the ocean and the mountains. And so I've always really enjoyed being outdoors and in nature. Fast forward many, many years, and my son, my oldest, Benjamin, who is just a chip off the old block. He can't but be outdoors. He when he was about 10 years old or so, he organized a stream cleanup. And I do not think anybody would accuse me of being a tree hugger, but somehow Ben had this itch, this desire to take care of, the local environment. And it was at that point that I started thinking about, well, he's, what is his concern besides the trash in the stream? And then I began to working at the bishops' conference. Part of my job was to help the bishops with environmental policy, and I began to learn about climate change. And that the combination of my son's involvement and my knowledge, new knowledge really of climate change made me feel like I wanted to move in that direction. So, so in 2006, I moved on from the Bishops' Conference to start Catholic Climate Covenant, and it's just been a great journey. Incredibly frustrating sometimes, which I'm sure we'll get to in this conversation. But that's my oldest was really the impetus, I think.
Thank you both for sharing that. For people who might be unfamiliar with the details of Laudato Si, can you tell us what is the core message of this encyclical and what part of it speaks to each of you individually?
Honora, do you want to just go first on these questions, or?
Oh, I think we alternate.
Okay.
Equal time.
That sounds great. All right. The core message of Laudato Si, I mean, there is so much in there, and if you haven't read the document, or if you've read it and haven't read it in a while, reread it in a while, I would recommend you do so. What stands out for me is this, and it's not Pope Francis's original thought by any means, but he really unpacks it, which is integral ecology, that everything is related. And there's a section in the encyclical where he talks about three key relationships: our relationships with nature, our relationships with one another, and our relationship with the Creator. And in the encyclical, it pretty much says that if any of those are out of balance, the other two will be out of balance. So if we're not taking care of one another, then we don't have much of a relationship with God. If we're not taking care of the environment, then we're not taking care of our neighbor. And if we're, so these things are all intertwined. And to me, that's the core message of it. And it also, a piece of that which demands our attention is our prayer life. And Pope Francis quotes Pope Benedict in the document. And Pope Benedict, at his first Mass as the new pontiff after John Paul II died, Pope Benedict said, and I always get this a little bit wrong, but essentially he said, the deserts of the world are growing because the desert of the human heart has become so vast. And what that said to me was, we have stopped paying attention to our connection to the universe and to one another. And because of that, the environment, our earth, our planet is being neglected. And if we get back in touch with the origin of our own being, which is stardust, this would be from Thomas Berry and others, then we can't help but recognize that we are connected and to the earth and to one another. All of this is gift, and we need to be co-creators with God to care for that.
Well, I would agree with you, Dan, on the integral ecology as being the center of Laudato Si. But what really grabs me, or has grabbed me, is, of course, that's my desire to have an integral ecological spirituality. But what has really grabbed me, and you alluded to it, is that Laudato Si challenges us to a new image of who we are and a new image of who God is. And when I came to really understand and internalize that message from Laudato Si, I began to understand why Laudato Si has been so resisted at some levels. I believe that I grew up, as many of us did, thinking that humankind was the epitome of creation, and that gave us a right to use and abuse and dominate. And Laudato Si invites us to, yes, understand that the human is special and has free will and intelligence, but that the human is a part of creation. It's a part of the circle of life. And we're not called to dominate, use, and abuse. We are meant and challenged to care for and to steward and to be one with, connected. Everything is connected. And then it also challenges us to a new image of God. And for me, this is radical, very radical, because it's different from what we grew up with. And it really, for me, it's like, you know how medicine has evolved and we don't any longer put leeches on people and suck their blood out as a means of healing? We now have antibiotics and vaccines. Well, the same is true in theology. Our theology has grown and developed, and our understanding of God now, which is so incarnational and so rudimentary and essential to who we are as Christians, Christ followers, is that God is in our midst. God is not up there and out there. God is among us, within us. And that changes everything. I'm never alone. So those two pieces, the all connected, as Dan spoke about, the integral ecology, which is the big kahuna, but our images of God and our images of self are challenged, and challenged radically. And that changes everything for me.
That reminds me of a quote. I think it's attributed to Thomas Berry, but it says, "Are we a collection of objects, or are we a communion of subjects?"
Thank you, Dan, because that's what I forgot.
Yeah.
I came to see the earth not as an object, but as a subject.
Yes. And it's a communion, right? I mean, it's all connected. And I love that language that Thomas Berry uses, because it draws us back to the Eucharist.
Yes, it does.
Which is a celebration of the earth. In fact, Pope Francis uses that towards the end of the encyclical from Pierre de Chardin. You know, that I think anyway. There's a whole section on that, and
yes,
I think it's really important that we see that.
Mm-hmm. You know, years ago, Franciscan media, some of us who have been around a while would remember them. They had wonderful sacramental videos for children, the first sacraments. And they had one that ended with the priest holding up a large host at the consecration. And as the video ended, the host became the planet.
Yes, exactly.
And that image has been critical to my own spirituality. Yes, images speak louder than words, and that one really did.
Yes. Yeah, very good.
Wow, thank you both so much. What impacts do you think Laudato Si has had on the church, but also on society, both in the United States and worldwide? Sister Honora, I think it's your turn.
It's my turn, I know. You know, as being involved in this project, I have the opportunity to be on many Zooms and webinars around international as well as national. And I'm very impressed with the impact it has had, more so outside of the United States than within the United States, unfortunately. But I would also have to say that, well, I don't hear the word Laudato Si used. Every night on the news, there's something about climate change now. And that I can't help but think that that is some of the impact of Laudato Si. More and more people are speaking about the environment and care of creation and the state of the planet. So my take on it is, I think internationally it has had, from what I see on my international Zooms, a big impact. In the United States, my feeling is not so much, except that climate change is the center every night on the news. And for some reason, we don't use Laudato Si. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all, Sister Honora. And we're the organization charged with trying to help implement Laudato Si, and I'm embarrassed to say that it's not going well.
Right.
I mean, it's going fine, but you're right. I think in the United States, because of our polarization and our divisions, both politically, but including within the church, which I think is partially driven by the political divides, it has not been very well received. And that's disappointing to me. I think too often folks in our own community see this as a political issue rather than a scientific and a moral issue, and I think that's unfortunate. However, we have since Laudato Si created over 400 parish creation care teams. Now there's 17,000 parishes, so there's a room for growth there. And there's a couple dozen, at least, I think almost 30 diocesan creation care committees. Some of them are sanctioned by the diocese. Others are just groups of folks getting together to try to do something at a diocesan level. So there is movement. And I would also agree with you that there is more and more movement on this because more and more people are impacted by climate change, which you were saying that earlier. I mean, almost everybody has experienced some crazy weather event that is totally out of the ordinary. These 1,000-year events are happening every year. So there's something going on there. And I think as people experience this, they're beginning to revisit those questions. What is science talking about? What is science saying to me here? And what is the church saying about this? And what is my moral obligation to live with a lighter footprint on the earth? So I think those questions are now being asked. Unfortunately, they're being driven by experience as opposed to a deep longing to be more in communion with the planet.
But Dan, I guess for myself, I don't understand why people don't get the urgency of it.
Yeah.
The facts are so clear, and I just, this will make you feel good, I think. Years ago, I met you in your office in Washington, and we had a conversation similar to this. And you said to me, the best thing that ever happened for the environment was that Al Gore got involved. And the worst thing that ever happened for the environment was that Al Gore got involved. Yeah. And it has become a political.
That's right.
And I don't understand what the problem is with it being political. Politics is about people.
Yeah.
So for me, that's not a problem that it's political, but I do understand the polarization. So, yeah.
Well, and we do. If I can jump in on one of our programs, we have this program that we call Catholic Energies. In fact, I was at the Passionist Center in Queens just this yesterday. There was a blessing of a solar array that we put in at their provincial headquarters in the Thomas Berry Retreat Center, and so with this new renewable energy and energy efficiency technology that's being deployed all over the country, we are doing so many good things. We're lowering the carbon footprint primarily we're saving these institutions money that can go back into their core mission activities, right? We are being a witness to the wider community. We're showing young people, and I'm sure we'll revisit this question as well, but we're showing young people that their church cares about their future. So what's not to like about that? Why is there so much resistance to it? That's what baffles me. And I recall John McCain, this was back in the late 2000s, he said, what if we're wrong on climate? What if we're really not heating the planet, and we implement all of this renewable energy technology and energy efficiency? If we're wrong, we've still generated jobs in the renewable energy field. We've cleaned up the atmosphere. We've again had this witness to the wider community. Our air is cleaner. Our buildings are higher performing and healthier buildings. If we're wrong, we've done all these other good things. So so he was just saying, like, let's just do it. It's good. It's a good thing to do. So,
Dan, do you think I'm being naive when I think that because Laudato Si challenges us, I think, so radically in terms of our images of God and our images of humankind, we're now in a new age, the Anthropocene, that our experiences of church is one that seems to me hesitates to say things have changed, or we need to change, or that's like, I don't think they got it wrong years ago. That's what they knew. But now we know different. So it seems to me that the church is resistant to say that. And it's almost like they're afraid. It seems like, do they think that's a failure, that they didn't know it 30 years ago, what we know today? That's unreal.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Our teaching on care for creation goes back to Genesis, not Earth Day. Right? I mean, Earth Day is 50 years old. Genesis is 2,500 years old. So what I'm trying to tell folks is, we're recovering ancient traditions that we are to be co-creators with God for this planet. And we are to leave this planet in such a way that when we pass it on to future generations, that they have a habitable planet, that they still have access to food, to clean water, to clean air, to all of the things that we enjoy today. But we're consuming so much and polluting the earth so badly that their future is seriously threatened.
Yeah.
So let's just recover the ancient traditions from Genesis to Catholic social teaching, and to the previous two popes and even earlier than that, on what we need to do to be better stewards of God's good gift. And if we can do that as a faith community, as 23% of the US Catholic population, if we would get our act together and really do something about the environment, we could transform the country and the world.
Thank you. And I'll just remind our attendees, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the Q&A box. You both talked about this feeling of resistance in the response to Laudato Si. And Sister, you even mentioned that you saw it implemented more abroad than you were in the United States. What would you like to see that you haven't yet seen in a U.S. Catholic response to Laudato Si?
It's your turn, Dan.
Oh, is it my turn? Oh, I was waiting for you. Our diocesan structures in particular do so much, and they do it so well. Every diocese has a Catholic charities structure, feeding the homeless, or feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, counseling the lost. We have programs in our parishes: St. Vincent de Paul, Daughters of Charity, Ladies of Charity. We have all kinds of things that we do for the betterment of our communities. Why isn't there a sustainability office in every diocese? Why isn't there a Laudato Si action plan in every parish or in every school? This is where we need to put our time and energy. Not that we don't do those other things. We need to continue to do those other things. But as we face a more and more threatened future, all of those other things are going to pale in comparison to the extreme weather events and the degradation of the planet, the shortage of food and water and all of these other things, which many countries, particularly in the developing world, are experiencing already. These mega droughts and in the Horn of Africa, they're suffering from a tremendous famine right now. We are partly responsible for that as people in a developed country who are consuming more than our fair share of the earth. So every diocese, every parish, every school ought to have a Laudato Si action plan that they are implementing so that we can together lower our carbon footprint, lower our consumption, and celebrate the fact that we are living in communion with all of creation. That's what I would love to see. Right now we have maybe, I haven't looked at the numbers yet, but the Vatican put together this Laudato Si action platform, and our organization is trying to push that within the United States. And I think we have maybe 10 parishes, maybe 15 that have submitted a Laudato Si action plan to the Vatican. And that's sad. I mean, there's 192 dioceses if you count the Eastern Orthodox and the rest of those. So that's, again, there's lots of room for growth there. But parishes, look, if every diocese had a sustainability officer and every diocese committed a year's worth of funding for a staff person to run that, and that staff person went around and began to demonstrate to parishes and schools how much money they could save just by doing energy efficiency projects, and then recover some of that money. So let's say 10% of that savings comes back to the diocese. That person will be funded fully from that revenue, from that savings, in 2-3 years. So if needs to be some seed money going into a diocese to hire a sustainability director, the sustainability director goes out and helps parishes and schools, all the facilities that are owned by the diocese, reduce their energy consumption. That savings comes back to some of that savings comes back to it's like a green revolving fund. Some of that savings comes back to the diocese, and now that position is funded, and they can go out and do more projects, right? So, maybe it's LED lighting first, and then it's controls, and then you have these ancient parishes and schools that need an HVAC replacement, and so now you have money to do that as well. So there's this virtual cycle that can happen if we commit that upfront money, and I think every diocese should be doing that.
Wow. That would be amazing.
It would be amazing.
It would be amazing. Amazing. Well, I guess for me, being a member of the Order of Preachers, I just wish I heard more connection between our faith and care of creation in the preaching in our churches.
Amen.
It's unheard. It's unheard of. And I don't mean to pound it to death or to speak of only that. But, when there's a crisis like a tsunami or a flooding or a tornado, we have no problem asking the parish for a second collection the next Sunday to help those people out. But we don't go the next step to say, why? Why should you help them? It's a missed opportunity. So I would just love to see our preaching start to make that integral ecological connection with our lives of faith.
Yeah, let me just say thank you for reminding me of the spiritual end of this as well. I tend to move to the practical a little too quickly, but yeah, you're right. I don't know why pastors are so afraid. Let's do it twice a year. Let's do it on the Feast of St. Francis, and let's do it on Earth Day. If we can have those 2 Sundays out of the 52 Sundays of the year for the pastor to do a homily on creation care, that would be twice as much as what they're doing now.
So Dan, how do we get the U.S. bishops to recommend that to the diocese?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
I don't know.
Well, if you don't know.
Well, every diocese has to, every bishop. Well, let me put it this way. I know that there are many bishops who do not like to have mandates to their pastors. So I think it's up to us as parishioners to go to our pastor and say, let me help you with a parish creation care team. Let me help you with a homily. And Catholic Climate Covenant, by the way, has a homily helps for every Sunday of the year. So if you want to preach about creation care, go to our website and you can find some ideas for that. So it's not hard. It's just we need to push our pastors and our other leaders to do something about this and be of service to them, because let's face it, they are very busy people with a lot of demands. So if we're not willing to help them and all we're going to do is complain about it, then I don't think we're doing our job.
Dan, that's a great suggestion. I hope everybody on this webinar really heard that Catholic Climate Covenant has homily hints that would help the pastors. And if each of us on this webinar could go to our pastor and ask for that Earth Day and October the 4th opportunity, that would be a fabulous outcome. If anybody does that, let us know. We'll publicize it and embarrass others to do the same. It's a great suggestion.
Embarrassment. That's the way that we move forward in this country.
Yeah.
This comment might actually answer this question with presenting your pastors with homily hints. But Dan, you also brought up the Laudato Si action platform. And I'm wondering, what are some practical ways that people can put thoughts into action? And if there's one thing that they can do to honor the core message of Laudato Si, other than asking their pastors to please dedicate these 2 Sundays a year to these kinds of homilies, what would that inspiration be? What would that singular action be that they could take?
You mean at a parish level, or as individuals?
An individual, within their family, within their parish community, whatever you think.
Well, what I often tell people is get outside. The first thing I think that we should do is get away from our computers and our screens and go outside. And it doesn't really matter where you live. Even if you live in the desert, there's beauty all around us. So go outside and do a walk in nature and look at the amazing variety of plants and animals, and it's just astounding. I'm looking out my window. I'm at my home today, working from home, and I'm looking at this beautiful oak tree and maple trees and birds, and there's just so much to appreciate the gift of this creation. Internalize that, and then take that back to your family, to your friends, and begin to have these harder conversations about what we could lose if we're not being more careful and paying attention. And then at the parish level, what I would suggest is gather people who think like you and who believe like you do, and begin to strategize how you can encourage the parish to do more around this. Maybe it's just simply instituting recycling as a first step. Maybe the second step is to, instead of using disposable cups and plates and napkins for the coffee hour after Mass, you begin to use the dishes that are available, and have a team wash those dishes. It takes about 20 minutes after Mass to do that, and reuse those types of things. Then maybe you can get into more complicated things like looking into an LED retrofit. A lot of utility companies will actually fund those because they don't want to have to continue to build power plants because we're using more and more electricity. And then the key to all of this, I think, is to engage young people. If there's a school attached to the parish, a grade school, perfect opportunity to get young kids involved. They are very concerned about their future. You ask any young person, maybe not so much grade schoolers, but high schoolers and college students, they're very concerned about climate, and they have motivation to do something, and they can be the leaders in the parish on this work. And the pastor or the principal or the other leaders, the youth ministers, they want to keep young people in the church or draw them back if they have left. And what better way to do that than to engage them on this issue, because they're already there. So we just need to bring them back and say, your church has something to say about this, and we need your leadership to help us understand how to deal with this environmental crisis we're facing. So I think that's the key. Honora, I think I jumped the gun. I think you were supposed to be first on that one.
Well, I'm glad you spoke, because everything you said is what I would have wanted to say. But what I was thinking was that, just today, Catholic Climate Covenant came out with that program for young adults. If just offering that to your youth minister and encouraging them to look at that as a possibility would be a great move forward. The other thing is that the Laudato Si action platform, you can Google that and you can download it all, and you can join as a small group. You can join as a parish. I join as representing my religious community. Religious communities were invited by Pope Francis to lead the charge on this. And we have, I don't know how many hundred religious congregations have submitted their Laudato Si action platforms to the Vatican, and they're on the website. So you can become a part of the Laudato Si action platform as a small group, small group from Queens, small group from Woodside, wherever you're from. It'd be nice if it was your parish, but I believe in the church as the people of God. It doesn't have to be the institution. So a small church group of people who don't have a building is still acceptable.
Thank you. And we actually have a question from Gerald. He has a question about politics, that Democrats are considered more likely to be environmentalists. And also in politics, people kind of don't want to discuss religion too much, and they're concerned maybe that Laudato Si is too related to Catholicism to really take on a broad stance in America. So how would you convince people who are maybe conservatives or Republicans and don't really identify with the Democratic Party that environmentalism isn't only a liberal topic, it's a topic that will really affect all of us and that we should all be treating seriously?
I'll go first because I probably have the least to say about it, Dan. I think I would ask them to help me understand their thinking, and I might invite them to, have they experienced anything that was caused by, have they experienced anything negative that was caused by climate change? Has anybody they know just think about Seattle. I mean, I lived in Seattle for 10 years, 110 degrees in Seattle, Washington. Our own summers on the East Coast are getting unbearable. So I think I'd begin with, because if they have, I think that's a place to begin. If they haven't, you might say, well, I'm really glad and happy for you, but know that it's coming, when none of us are going to be spared of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not interested in whether it's Democrat or Republican. I'm interested in who cares for the common good.
Yeah, I guess what I would also say is don't say you're an environmentalist. Say you're a caretaker of our common home. Let's not use that language. We are talking about being co-creators with God, caring for God's gift of creation. This teaching, as I said earlier, goes back to Genesis. Let's use the example of St. Francis, who was deeply in love with creation. And there's some great stories in his first biographer, Thomas of Solano, talks about the trances, I guess you might say, that Francis would get into when he was holding a duckling or, some other creature. It would just transport him back to God because those things came from God. So I think if we can talk more in language that is faith-based as opposed to environmental community-based, I think we're going to have a better chance. But I would also agree with Sister Honora that we need to talk about what is it that you care about too. We were joking just ahead of the webinar when we were on earlier about what's our favorite thing to eat or drink. For me, it's coffee. Coffee's under threat around the world. And I'm panicked about that because I do love my coffee. Or chocolate. All of these things that we take for granted, are threatened by climate change and by environmental degradation. We also need to begin to draw the links between, in Catholic social teaching, we have this thing called the preferential option for the poor, which means that we always need to base our decisions on how they're going to impact the least among us, right? The people on the margins. And in any community, even in the United States, where there are low-income people, you're going to find environmental degradation. When I worked for the Archbishop of Cincinnati many years ago, we were fighting the siting of a new landfill. I was working out of the Dayton office, and it was on the west side of the Great Miami River, which runs north and south through the city. And on the west side of town is where most of the low-income folks lived. And that's where they wanted to site the landfill. And so we did some community organizing to get that stopped. But Waste Management, the company there, wouldn't dare try to site that in the eastern part of the city because that's where all the wealthy people lived. So this kind of stuff happens all the time. So let's make sure that we're also making the connections. It's never just about, Catholic social teaching is both and, right? It's both care for creation and care for the poor. It means we have both rights and responsibilities to ensure that those rights are available to everyone. So it's never just about me. Then the pandemic is the perfect example of this. I mean, I have some dear friends and family who, refused to wear a mask because it was uncomfortable. And I would say, this isn't about you. It's about us. It's about all of us. Why don't we keep each other safe from these environmental harms? It's about rights and responsibility. Sure, I have a right not to wear a mask, but I have a responsibility to wear one because I don't want to infect someone else or get infected and then reinfect someone else. I mean, we always have to be careful about either or. It's always both and within Catholic teaching.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to see if I can squeeze 2 more questions into our last 10 minutes or so. How do you inspire people to hope in spite of the urgency and seriousness of so many of the issues that are related to our common home? You know, it can seem very hopeless if you watch the news and go only based on that. How do you inspire people to take action and to feel hope, even if they're not presented with a hopeful situation?
Whose turn is it?
Yours.
I knew that was coming. I set myself up for that, didn't I?
Yeah.
You know, it's a challenge to inspire hope, especially when you when you become more aware of what's happening. But again, I would say that getting out into nature is part of that, letting that sink in and become part of who you are, that you want to protect what we have. I also think that we have to go about this work, any of the work that we do in the church, for others, for our neighbors, which is what we're called to do. We always have to do it with a smile, with a sense of humor, with the realization that we can only do what we can do, and trust in God to help do the rest. I think we can't be a famous line from Harry Fagan, who was a social action director in diocese. We cannot be grim do-gooders. Nobody likes a grim do-gooder. We can do good, but let's do it. Let's do it with a song in our heart. In fact, at the end of Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, "Let us sing as we go." It's a beautiful line in that encyclical. I just love it. Let's make sure that we're doing this together. That's another hopeful sign, is to do it with others. We can't do it by ourselves. We have to join in community. That's what we're all about. So, and then thirdly, I think it's thirdly or fourthly or whatever, but let's do it with young people too. Let's do intergenerational activities on this. Those of us who are a little bit older, I think I'm just past young adulthood, but those of us who are a little bit older need to reach out and walk with and be led by, in fact, young people. So let's do that as well. I think that's going to be a lot more joyful than than just throwing our hands up and saying it's hopeless.
I guess I would say it's about relationships. And I think it's Greta Thunberg who says that if you want to instill hope, then you move people to action, because action is where hope is. So if I could introduce somebody to someone who's in need, and I think when it takes the face of another human being, it can inspire hope and can change people's attitudes. So anything I could do to make a connection would probably inspire some hope.
Thank you. I think those are beautiful answers. And I especially love the idea of just getting out into nature, because it's so easy to feel hope and peace and joy when you're standing at the beach listening to the waves crash. If you're like me, maybe it's a forest or a mountaintop for some of you, wherever it is.
I have a friend who's very involved in this topic and has been for years and years and years. I never used to understand where she was coming from, but now I do. And she would say, we only go out now, mostly, to get in the car, to go someplace, to go in again. Let's go out to go out. Let's try that for a while and see what difference that makes.
Yeah, I thanks, Honora. It reminded me of something else I wanted to say, which is there's a joy in trying to live more simply. I'll just tell this. I'll try to tell this very quick story. Years ago, when my kids were playing softball, or baseball, I was complaining that the Archdiocese of Washington, the CYO league that my son was playing on, they were scheduling games on Sundays. And I called up the CYO office for the Archdiocese, and I said, Sunday is a day of rest. It's for families. Why are you scheduling baseball games on a Sunday? And there were two responses. One was, you're the first person that has ever called about that, which I thought was sad, because nobody else wants their Sunday to be open. And secondly, that's the only time we can get baseball fields. And I said, well, it's sad that I'm the only one who's done that. And secondly, you just have to try harder to get baseball fields not on a Sunday. But that's also this keeping one day of the week, the Sabbath day, for us it's Sunday, keeping that sacred is an opportunity for us to put aside all of the stuff that we've been doing all week long, put aside the screens, put aside the work, everything that we do from Monday to Saturday, right? And just get outside and enjoy nature, to remind ourselves of the gifts that we have received, to have a day of rest, and to think about our lifestyles and our, of creation and our relationships with one another. So I think if we could recapture some notion of the Sabbath, I think that would go a long way.
Great suggestion.
Thank you. I'm going to try and squeeze in as our last question just a little bit about how Laudato Si has affected each of you and your work personally. Sister, I know you said that you were the Laudato Si coordinator for your community, and what does that mean and look like? And Dan, how was your organization directed when Laudato Si came out? How did it change direction? How did it react to it?
Who's first? Me?
I think you should Joyce.
Well, I'll just quickly. Laudato Si was in some ways a miracle. The fact that Pope Francis dedicated an encyclical, the highest level of teaching in the church, to the environment was, I was giddy, to be honest with you, having done this work for 9 years previous. It was just amazing that we now had this authoritative teaching on the environment. And the way it changed our work is it gave us a framework, a solid framework on which to do our work. It was an amazing opportunity to highlight not just teaching on care for creation, but this amazing Pope who took the name, had the audacity to take the name of everybody's favorite saint, Saint Francis. So it was a real opportunity for us to kind of up our game.
For me, personally, it has impacted my spirituality and my prayer. I'm the coordinator of my community, which means that I have, with a team, I constantly try to engage the sisters in terms of how can we respond further, deeper, more to each of the goals of the Laudato Si action platform. So this year, which is our second year, we're just finishing our second year. Our goal this year, one of the goals, we had 3 goals previously, which we continue working on. And then we added a 4th one, which was ecological education. So it just means that, I send out resources, we have movies, we have videos we watch, we read books and have book discussions. So this year, we're focusing on educating ourselves in terms of the fact about climate change. So it's about engaging others in the urgency, in the need, in the challenge of our faith to care for our common home and not shoot ourselves in the foot.
Are there any key initiatives by either of your communities or organizations that you'd like to share?
My favorite is the one I'm involved in, which is working with an indigenous community on Long Island to plant and harvest kelp and clean up the waters around Long Island so that our shellfish come back. and it's going really well and very successful.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And 2 religious communities are working with them on that.
Yeah. Just for the covenant, I mentioned our Catholic Energies program where we're helping parishes and schools and other entities adopt solar. You can just go to our catholicenergies.org website. And then we are kind of going all in on this youth and young adult strategy where we're trying to engage young adults and youth, so like high school, college, and up until I think we identify young adults as up to 39, to have them just engage in this and then organize in their local communities, begin to make some change. So we're doing a lot of work on that. And Sister Honora mentioned our recently released Homemakers program, which is geared towards youth and young adults. So those are a couple of the big initiatives, and we're doing lots of other things, but we don't have time to get into all that.
Well, thank you, Dan, first of all, for classifying me as a young adult. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
For joining us today, and you as well, Sister Honora. Thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to share my screen here briefly for anybody interested in delving into Laudato Si further, or in coming up with any ideas for action steps that you can take on your own or as a community, as a parish. I definitely invite you to take a look at Creation at the Crossroads, which is up on your screen. You can scan that QR code to go to our website. It's available, I think, for only $10 until the end of Memorial Day weekend. So please, I encourage you to check it out. And otherwise, I thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Sister and Dan, again, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you all enjoy the unofficial kickoff to summer this weekend and really get out there in nature and experience what it is we're trying to save.